Welcome, Ruthie. It is so nice to have you here.
Yeah.
Abs and I feel really privileged.
Yeah.
We heard you speak at Life Church, and we're both like, we need her.
We need her. We
And
actually
you and
both
Abs,
walked away
yes.
and text people and we're like, sorry, can we just have the full name of the lady who was speaking?
Yeah, because you just, there was something about you we were like,
there
we
was
just,
something about you.
was amazing. Obviously, this year has been a crazy year.
Mm-hmm.
And for you and your family, I guess for everyone, but for you guys, COVID has changed the world, really.
Yeah.
And obviously you and your family got COVID and had to navigate that in the last, it was just the last one we just had, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Which is crazy, and I think it feels so distant when you think about it. I think when we're going through life right now, when you don't know anyone that's kind of navigated it, it does feel far out of reach, and it feels a little bit like, is this really going on? So when we heard your story, we're like, wow, that's crazy. And so why don't you talk us through that journey?
Yeah, so just as crazy it was for you, it's crazy for me as well, because I work in public health. So even though I work in public health, it was still just the same as it would never happen to me.
Yes.
Yes. You know, I'm protected and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so when it did happen, it was Father's Day. We got the phone call late at night. Well, actually, I'll go to the testing story. So my husband was like, oh, we need to go get tested. We're close contacts of a close contact.
Yeah.
And then I was okay, like, you can get tested because you've probably had the most exposure to that person. So if you're going to get it, if anyone's going to get it, it'll be you, not anyone, like us or the kids. And then we went into the testing station in Henderson, and they, he was getting tested, and I was like, if it hurts, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Yes.
And then he was like, oh, it's fine. But he was like crying. So I was like, are you sure? It's fine. And then I was like, are you sure? Like, I'm going to, so I just did it, like, just to say that I've had a test before. It wasn't because I genuinely thought that I was going to have COVID, and then throughout that night everyone was getting their texts back saying you're negative, you're negative, you're negative. So all of my children, my husband got tested, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, our whole family got tested. They all got texts to say that they're negative. And then I was like, I never got my text, and I was like, that's so weird, why haven't I got my text yet? And then I started to feel something's probably not right, because it was like 8 at night and I still hadn't received a text, but everybody had.
Wow.
And if we had this group chat and everyone's like, hey, we're going to, like, this is our screenshot of our negative text. And I was like, oh, well, what's happening with me? And then I got a phone call, and it was like a hospital number. I knew straight away. And then I answered the phone call. And she said, yeah, unfortunately, you've got COVID. And I was just so in shock. And I was sitting in my lounge filled with all of my family. Oh, my children are running around. We had a cousin over, and I was just like, everyone needs to get out.
Did you say that?
Yeah. I was like, I need to remove myself. So they said, just sit on it for now. Don't tell anyone. You just have to just write down everywhere you had been, everyone that you've been in contact with for the last 2 weeks.
Which is a big job.
Which is a big job. And because we had just gone in that week from level 3 to level 2, we were allowed out of the house, back to restaurants and cafes, which I had been to quite a lot that week. Yes. So I had to, just write down everywhere I'd been. And I did call my best friends because they were at my house the day before. And they had been to Father's Day lunches.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about like all of like our komata, like all the elderly that could have been at risk. So I was like, I can't risk it any longer. I have to ring my best friends and say like, hey, I've got COVID, I've just found it. I had to ring my boss, who I'd been with that week in close contact. We had been to cafes together, and just had to start telling people like, this is what I've got, and everyone has to get tested too.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And what was that process like after? So when you found out, what followed that?
So I had to isolate in my own room away from the kids, and that was really hard. Yeah. Because they were clawing at the door like, Mum, why aren't you playing with us? Why aren't you making us breakfast? That sort of thing. So they were making the decision with me, do I stay at home or do I go to a facility? And at the time I was like, I can stay home. But with them clawing at the door, I was like, I can't have them think I've just deserted them.
Yes.
So I agreed, like, it's like, okay, I'll go to Jet Park, which is a managed quarantine facility out south, and I'll go there for 10 days.
What a selfless thing to do, first off, because
you so hard though. Yeah. I was like, I don't want to go. I want to stay with them.
Of course.
And my husband was like, you better go. I think you should go. I was like, stop it. And I was like, let's just hug, like, let's get this together. And then let's get COVID together. I was like, why don't we just all go? And he was like,
you better go.
you see? And then, so he was like, I think you should go. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was a lot of prayer and a lot of like, and then I started to get sick. So then from that point, I was like, oh, no, I don't want to pass this on. I have to go. So we organised a shuttle to come and pick me up. You pack your bags and you just kind of wait around. In that waiting time, which was 2 days, I got a phone call that my son had retested as positive, who was one. So from there I was just like,
this is too much.
Yeah.
We've got to go. Like so we made the decision as a family. We were like, okay, if my son's gonna get it, his 4-year-old sister's gonna get it.
Yeah.
My 16-year-old niece is gonna, like, it's kind of we've been in each other's pockets. For 2 weeks. So we made a decision as a family, we'll go together. Joe was like,
so your husband was like, you're done with me now.
So they were gonna separate the positives from the negatives. So me and my son goes at the time, and then my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law also tested positive. So they organised a room for us four, and then the negatives stay on the complete opposite side of the facility, but we're still kind of together, which we were like, oh, and then it's negotiation from there, because it's like, if they ended up testing positive, then they restart their time, then they can't mix with us, because then it mix up our time. And there was just like so much going on. I was just like, well, my daughter is really close with me, and she can't go, like if I'm in there for 10 days and then she tests positive later, that's another 10 days, it's 20 days on top of it. So I was just like, this isn't gonna work if we're just gonna be together. Let's just all go in one room and just navigate this season together, regardless of what that looks like. Which we did. So we all had a room together. So it was my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my 3 children, my husband and me, and I was 30 weeks pregnant at the time. In a 2-bedroom. So it was quite...
2 bedrooms.
Oh my goodness.
And extremely sick. So there's different strains. So I wonder if it's because I was pregnant, I was the most sickest. And it was the fever, the chills, that you can't lie down because it knocks the wind out of you. And then my sister-in-law, she only had like loss of taste, loss of smell, and then my children were asymptomatic. So it was like...
It's so they're like, what are we in here for?
So I kind of sold it to them as like a holiday. I was like, we're going on holiday.
Wow, and it's hard for you to say.
And especially because when they rock up, they see like army people there in like full PPE. They're like, this ain't a holiday. Like, kids are so onto it. And but they were just angels throughout the whole. I feel like if they had made it, like if they were scared and that sort of thing, it would have made it really difficult for us. But just the fact that they were so strong made us strong throughout the whole process. And then so we were there for 10 days, and then I ended up, because I was so sick, I ended up getting pneumonia, and they call it COVID pneumonia, because of the chills. I had to like have cold showers and then sit on the deck and then try and regulate my temp, and in that process I got pneumonia.
When you're also pregnant, so you've got that worry as well.
So how do they navigate the help with telling you to do that? Like, is there a nurse at the...
So you get daily checks. So your like full checks, so like blood pressure, oxygen levels, your temperature, and they just come and check you. The more sick you are, the more often they come. So because I was the most sickest, they came every hour practically. In the night, and I thought that was hard until I went into Middlemore Hospital, and I was like, okay,
so you went to hospital.
So I went twice, so I had 2 stints there. So the first stint was I couldn't feel baby moving, and I was so like terrified, and then they don't have the facilities at Jet Park to check on the baby or anything like that, so like we have to move you to Middlemore. So I stayed there first for a couple of days, and that was terrifying. And at that point no one knew we had COVID, so
they just purposely not tell people, or
I'm not sure what their process is, because then it kind of happens pretty quickly after that. But and then I hadn't told anyone that I had COVID outside of our close group. But at that point where my baby's life was at risk, I was like, nah, I'm ringing people. I'm telling people now, because I need prayer. I need someone to lift me. Well, I can't lift myself. And it was so terrifying. The thought of just my baby, and they don't really know much information about COVID whilst you're pregnant in New Zealand. Like in America, they're like, the stats that they have is all based on like America.
Yes.
So not in New Zealand and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Do you feel like New Zealand looked after you?
Definitely. Like we are extremely privileged in New Zealand. In New Zealand. To have facilities like Jet Park and all the different hotels where you're fed, you're hydrated, you have these hourly checks, whereas in other countries they don't have this. It's like isolate at home, and whether they stay home or not, that's up to them. And just I think with other countries that are still going through it, but we're able to talk in close proximity to each other. We're able to still eat out and kind of go about our normal life. It goes to show, I guess, how well we're doing. But obviously there is room for improvement.
Totally. And you would have felt that in some statements of, and it's a hard thing to make you feel okay when it's an isolated thing of like you can't help but feel like just put in the corner.
Right? Because it's isolated.
Because they're like dressing these things and they're like so away from me, and you're like, oh my gosh.
And you do feel like that. And I guess that comes to like the next question of like, there's a whole stigma around it, and I think because we're just naive, like unless you've been like, you're naive to it. And was there any shame, or did you feel ashamed around telling people you had it, or were you like nervous to tell people you had it?
I think it was.
Do you feel like there was a stigma?
There was like processes. So the first was I need to let all my friends that I saw know. So that was like there was no shame or anything like that. But as the days kind of progressed, and I was seeing like everywhere that I had eaten, or like countdown, like everywhere, all over the media. And then the comments about why didn't they just stay home? Because you're asymptomatic, you don't know you have it.
Exactly.
Until someone discloses they're a close contact, and it's just a bit of a process. So that's when the shame came. I was like, I don't really want to tell people that I've got COVID. But then the sicker that I got, I was like, actually, we really need to tell our church family because we really need the prayer. But COVID stigma is 100% a thing. Like at Middlemore, like when they come in, they're in full PPE, they can't really talk to you. So when you were talking about being isolated, that was the hardest thing because they can't talk to you. I had to wear a mask. I can hardly breathe myself.
You can't breathe properly.
You can't breathe, but you have to put a mask. And it's not like the masks that we use, like the disposable ones. They're like the like the Donald Duck looking ones, like the real
like Peptic has.
And then when you are getting transported to and from the facility, they take you through the door, which is like where the prisoners go. So they're like, even though like I probably wouldn't have felt shame, but I think the processes around it made me feel like, okay, we're going through the back door. And then when you're walking and you're in the full like shields, everyone obviously knows. Like,
so far,
you've got COVID. Like I've never seen any like people just like move so quickly. And then even like returning back to work afterwards, and even going back to church afterwards, about how people might perceive. It was nothing about how other people made me feel, but I was just like, oh, are you guys okay to hug, or
you're worried about
and but thankfully I had my family where we kind of all journeyed this together, that we were like, what do we do when we go back to work or school, and do we like act like everything's okay? And so definitely
because you got pneumonia. Is it how do you say it?
Pneumonia.
Pneumonia. I always get that wrong, and it bugs me. So you got that on top of COVID. How are you health-wise now?
Now, completely fine. I think but while I was in it, it was awful. You can't move. Showering is pretty much, I had this nurse Lena, shout out to Nurse Lena from Middlemore. She gave me bed baths and stuff, and I was just like, I'm so sorry.
So how does she do that? So she's just obviously in her gear and stuff.
Full PPE, and then she just like kind of shuts you, like turn, and you're like turn. And it's so like, oh my gosh, I was just like saying to her, crying, I was like, I'm so sorry.
It makes you really appreciate people that give their services like that and spend their days doing that.
And because I was like 30 weeks pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh.
I can't believe you did that pregnant.
Yes,
like,
I know.
Stuff that,
That
is crap. And also, you've got that, you're pregnant, you're feeling like all that crap, and then you've also got other kids, and you're yes, they're not showing signs, but they're isolated, and how are they, and all those dynamics of life and emotion comes into it. It's like you said, your kid's scratching at the door. It's like that is like, that's a thing of a mum, is you're like, we can't change a situation, but it's still, there's all these emotions within it as well that you've had to navigate.
It's, you know, it's been a crazy year, and I think for me it's like, I look at it, and I obviously being from the outskirts of it, do you feel, what would you say to people not taking it seriously?
Yeah.
Because in New Zealand we are really privileged where we are now, like around the world, and not living like we're living now, you know, in terms of it's all good. We're out, we're talking to people
are like breathing in it. Like,
yes, totally. And in other countries they're still isolated, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not gone. It is still out there. Yeah. So I guess, what would be your advice for people that aren't taking it seriously?
I think the mantra, like, kia kaha, be strong, be kind.
Yeah.
It just speaks volume.
Wow.
Whilst we're young, and if we got COVID we can bounce back, we really need to think of the older community that you know, there are 25 other families out there that aren't spending time with the 25 that died from COVID in New Zealand this Christmas. And while, you know, we can bounce back, and we've got our health and that sort of thing, there are other vulnerable community that can't or haven't. So it's just thinking about others, especially the ones that already have underlying conditions, because their bounce back is not a reality.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
Oh, that's, you'll be, do you feel like sometimes when someone is like, say public transport, we're meant to be wearing a mask right now, and you don't see someone wearing a mask, you just like,
please,
just do
when
it.
we left Jetpack and we were like, freedom, I can't move. And then like we were like driving and we were like, saw these people just like with no mask, we're like, please put it on. You don't want to be where we were just.
And also the people that are saying that COVID's not real and all those dynamics, you've now got this thing of being like, honey, bro, I felt the shivers, man. I'm telling you, it's real. Like, I've been in hospital with it, or whatever. Like, you know, but it's that pull of frustration which humanity has anyway in every life, every area of life. But you have this pull now of really, when you're so convicted and you know something's there, and you know you've experienced it, and then you're going to constantly see people just be average around it. It will be interesting how you then navigate that. What did you learn about God in your hardship?
Oh my gosh, so much. He was literally my only friend like while I was in Little More, like, because he can't talk to anybody else. For 24 hours a day you can't leave that room. It's like a tight air sealed room.
Oh my goodness.
And so the nurses that would come in, and then they would just leave, and they weren't meant to talk to me unless it was just, you know, like, these are your pills and that sort of thing. But God showed me his love firstly through people. So the nurses would come in, and they'd know that they weren't really allowed to like conversate much outside of medical terms, but they were like, we're praying for you, or can we, so I'm going to get emotional. There was a nurse, and she was like, can we let's bless our food together, let's bless your pills together. And I was just like, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord, because when I can't see you, or I feel like I don't feel you, you're sending these messages to me through people that I don't even know, and that they're risking their lives talking to me because, they're risking their lives talking to me just to give me a blessing over my food and my pills, and saying that they're praying for me, and so that was the the first like kind of like bout of strength that I felt. I was like, okay, cool, God's sending me his messengers. And then I was like, okay, Lord, oh my gosh, like, because at the time I couldn't talk either, so I can't talk because the shortness of breath is so and my expression of worship is through singing. So I was just like listening to worship and just bawling my eyes out, because how I would worship him is that I would sing to him. Oh my gosh, sorry.
No.
So I couldn't do that. So all I had to do was just like lift my arms and just like, Lord, like, I don't know why this is happening to me, why this is happening to my family. I miss my kids so much. but you are just so good.
Yeah.
You're looking after me in here.
Yeah.
And he was just, if there was like days of like just pure emotion where I just couldn't get up, and he's just like, it was very practical advice God was giving me. It was like, get up, like just get up. You're just woe is me. And I was like, Lord, take this cup. Why have you forsaken me? I was like, I'm dramatic. So I was like, Lord, like, what's going on? And he's like, just get up. Oh my gosh, like shower. Just do the things that
I love that.
And like you're kind of waiting on the Lord for something like super spiritual.
Yes.
And he's just like, just get up.
That is so good.
Can you turn the shower on for me, please? Just now, like the rain.
That's exactly what I was saying the other day. It's like God gives us a brain to think, you know, like, and do these, like, just get up.
Yeah,
I love that.
Up.
I love that.
And because I was like, but I can't breathe, and like all these things, and he's just like, just get up. And I was like, and I got up and I had a shower, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Stop feeling sorry for myself. It's time to like dig my heels in because the year before I just finished a year in Bible college.
Wow.
So he's like, you need to start activating all the things that you've learnt the year before, because this is what it was for. Like moments like this. So I was just like, oh my gosh, okay.
And it puts things into perspective of the power of human interaction. The fact that you loved in that moment was that those nurses speaking to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's materialistic stuff all just gets wiped away when you're in that moment and it's just human interaction.
100%, yeah.
And it's so cool what you say about God prepping you before the storm, because someone once said that to me, and it's the biggest thing I've taken is when life is so good, prep for the days that might not be as good. And it's in those times where something happens and you're not scrambling for all the things that you need to learn about hardship and trials and this and that. It's like, you know that you're going to be good. And so when something is faced and you're faced with what you're faced with, it's like, you know all that you've learned before these days. And we can put those into action, and it's so good. It's so easy to enjoy life when it's good and and kind of forget about it, stepping into his word, and forget, like, you know, you get busy in the good. But it's actually pulling it back and being like, I'm going to just see what he talks about hardship and see what he talks about being close to me, because next week, Wednesday, may not be laughing my head off or whatever.
So true. It's so true. It's
not living for the bad things, but it's being aware that is life.
Yeah, definitely. What did you miss the most in isolation?
Fresh air. Being in Middlemore, you can't leave, and I would just like look outside my window and just see everyone like walking around, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just can't wait to like feel fresh air. And the funny thing is that when I did feel the fresh air, I like had the wind knocked out of me because I still was like, you know, like really sick. So I was like, and I was like, but just like the feeling of it was like, it feels fresh, because like aircon for all that time.
Especially the hospital. And you wouldn't even be able to have the aircon on in the hospital.
No, like it's just like a hot room.
Oh my goodness.
Oh babe, that's so tough. Even just stepping into hospital sometimes, I'm like, I just feel like
yucky.
Like you feel like blurry, like foggy.
Because there's no like natural light. It's all like dim lights and massive toll on my mental health for sure.
Yes. When we were talking about this, me and Em, the other day, is you can be holding everything and then one day everything can be stripped away, and we can't change that. That is life. And that's never something that God plans for us, but it is something that just is there. And that's why we serve a God who's so kind and generous and wants to keep connecting with us and wants to help us through that hardship. But when we have it all and then it's stripped away, we get perspective every time something happens, you know? You gain a new level. It's like something happens and you're like, okay, I've got some good perspective. And then something else happens, you're like, oh, I'm going to need to get some more perspective. And then we do build that. What is the thing that you've gained perspective on, and do you live each day differently from that, what you've experienced through having COVID and being in isolation? You know, like today, just even I saw you walking back to the car with your 2-week-old baby. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and like you're walking in the sunshine, there, and it's like, you look beautiful, your hair is amazing, you look healthy and great, and it's different to what it was when you were, a nurse was wiping you down. Like, come on, like, so do you live each day a little bit differently from that?
Yeah, so perspective was actually our word in isolation.
Was it?
Because when I came back from Middlemore back to Jetpack, everyone, like all my family at Jetpack were like, oh, it sucks here, like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, guys, oh my
I'll
gosh,
tell you where it sucks.
we got food. I was eating like a half a potato and the smallest portions. I was like, we got the best food, like, because you eat like salmon, steak, like mushrooms, like mean ass food.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, this is amazing, like in comparison to where I was, but because my family had just been there,
that was
their perspective. And I was like, no, like, we get, like, let's go for a walk. Whereas before I left, I was like, I don't want to go for a walk, I don't want to, let's just stay inside.
And now you're like, I'm kind of free.
And I was like, oh my gosh, let's go for a walk where we can touch the air and grass and that sort of thing. And they were like, you're crazy. So yeah, perspective was definitely our word in there. And coming back home is just the things that we didn't appreciate that we now super appreciate. So before all this happened, I was like, oh, I hate my curtains, they're yellow, and oh, my bed's so uncomfy, I need a new bed. You come home, you're like, oh my gosh, my bed, I love it. Like, oh my gosh, these curtains, they bring the sun in. All these little things that you were just so unappreciative of. And now, like, oh my gosh, so content and like so happy and grateful for the life that we have. And I think that's the thing that we just unappreciate, the normalcy of our life. The going to work, the children, the drudgery of life. But it's not like you said, it could literally be taken away. And in the word it says, our life is but a vapor here. And it could just go like that, like everything could just be taken away. So why would we want to live a life of oh, this sucks, oh, that sucks, oh, we need to change that? Or we could live a life of, God, thank you so much. Every night we go to bed, we just pray, thank you, Lord, for our children and our house, that we have a roof over our house, food, these the choice of going out, where other people just don't have that luxury, whereas we wouldn't even think of it as a luxury, really.
That's so amazing that you've gained that not amazing you walked what you've walked, but
to get that
to capture that perspective. And I don't know if everybody knows to capture perspective. Like, I think about, we're talking about perspective right now, but there may be people listening that's like, I've never actually thought to like treasure the perspective that I gain, or even think about it in a way of, let's have some perspective. And I think that's good to learn.
And even as you said, you do it every night. I think it's even creating traditions around that perspective. So now you do it every night. So you're reminded, because I think we can go through hardship, and for the first wee while we can have perspective, and then we lose it and go back to our normality. But I think if you've created a tradition out of that, like every night, that's, awesome as well. Quite a good practical way to kind of keep that. So would you say, because we've got down here, I guess, what's the silver lining that's come out of this year for you guys as a family? And obviously you've kind of delved on the perspective as a family, but is there anything else, I guess, that you've come out of this that you're like, that's been...
Definitely quality time with our family. So you'll never have, because we ended up being in Jetpack for 34 days, and then another
34 days
between Jetpack and Middlemore, and then another further 10 days isolating at home with security outside to make sure you don't go anywhere. So the silver lining is that we spent a lot of quality time with my husband, our children, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, whereas we would never have that time usually. And that's the silver lining, was just that time that we got to get to know our kids in the different stages of life that they're in. 4 and 2, like 4 and 1 at the time. They are constantly changing and learning. I'm a full-time mum, full-time worker. I study. And so there is time where that was, that quality time we didn't really have. But 34 plus 10, 44 days of just being with each other and learning their little personalities and who they are now was the silver lining. We're like, oh my gosh, they're growing. Like, they're growing so much. And in that time that we were in there, we're like, oh, they're just constantly growing and learning, and they're sponges. And we just, even though we were going through a hard time, we had like really fun times too. We would like stay up and just play games. and like bake and cook and things that we wouldn't really do had we had not been in isolation.
I think this
really
year's going to change a lot of people. You know, I think we're going to go in, this is actually our last episode for the year, which is amazing and a really awesome one, I guess, to finish the year with.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are going to go into 2021 different. You know, it has been a crazy year, and for you guys it's been even more so. But I think that's it. It's time. It's creating space to be around your family and
Also, did your husband end up catching it?
He did. Everyone did.
Oh, everyone. Yeah. So you did.
Everyone except for my 4-year-old, who's still currently
Isn't that crazy?
So crazy, because she's been in amongst. She was, in everyone's pockets. Yeah, she's like the bundle of joy that's like talking to everyone, hugging everyone, and she just never got it.
So how did they test little kids?
Still through the nose.
No way. Yeah. Oh, so they would have hated that situation.
She especially, because she was asymptomatic, she never had ended up getting it. They test more often with the non-COVID. So yeah, she still actually suffers. Like if anyone knocks at the door, she's like, "Is that for the nose? Is that for my nose?" No. Because there's that fear of doctors and
it's the aftermath as well.
And now we're living through the PTSD and
especially for that young of not fully understanding or comprehend. They do, but there's still kind of those questions.
Yeah, goodness. We like to thank people here because we know that we can't do this journey alone or any journey, and we're grateful for our community, and we want people to know to have community, and to you called your friends, and once you realize that something might be wrong with your baby, you're like, no, we need prayer, we need people around us. And some people don't know that that's important, and we hope that by thanking people and giving people that acknowledgement, they can see how great that is. So is there somebody that you'd like to thank? We're going to look into this camera. Hey, him, if you could just thank them directly.
So there's so many people to thank in our journey through our time in isolation. I especially want to thank my mother-in-law, who, oh my gosh, I knew I was going to cry, who, while we were in isolation, looked after our children, made sure that they were fed, but stayed up all night doing my cold flannels and just looking after me, praying over me while I was in isolation, while I was in Middlemore, ringing her friends to see who could help, who needs to pray for us, just constantly working on my behalf when I felt like I couldn't. So I thank you, my mother-in-law, Alofa and Nielsen, for everything that you've done for us, for my family, for your son, and for your grandchildren. I'm so appreciative of you. I know in the past, we've had quite the relationship, but I love you very much, and thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, should we bring it in?
Yes, bring it in.
Let's bring it in for a hug.
Bring it in for a hug.